This is Rugby for Rookies with your hosts Adam Dunford and Jake Shaw, a podcast for the fans, by the fans. Join us as we take you through the sports we love. The high intensity and memorable moments. And what makes them great. Brought to your ears by W2 Records. Watch the scene as W2 are ready to take over. So, welcome back everyone to episode 2 of Rugby for Rookies. I'm quite happy. I was happy with how episode 1 went. How are you feeling, Jake?
Yeah, no, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. So, today, we mentioned it slightly on the last episode, but today, I really want to get into a wee bit more about the chat of like the differences between rugby and football. I think we went on a wee bit about it yesterday, but I think today would be a really good time to actually just, delve right into the nitty gritty bits of it, because as you know, there's a lot of like stark differences. Do you want to get us started?
Yeah, for sure. So I watch and follow football every week. I go quite often. I was actually supporting my local team, Partick Thistle, last night, and it's really easy to access. I was just wanted to know, do you feel the same about rugby? Do you think it's just as easy to access as football?
I don't, to be honest. I think a big thing in this rugby is the fact is you're almost getting outpriced now, and I think like at Murrayfield especially, like we went to Murrayfield a year or 2 years ago to go see Scotland Australia, and that cost us £40, and I thought that's not bad, not including obviously getting there and all that, and I think that was perfect and that's what you wanted. But now you're looking like well over £100 a ticket, and that's like just it's not doable for most people. And I think like you look at the club games, it's more doable. You can go to Glasgow games for very, very little. You can go to Edinburgh games for very, very little. But I think there's just I don't really know how to say, but it's almost been outpriced, and it's going back to that chat we had last week about the private schools and public schools. And it's kind of almost like pricing it for only these public school people, only these families that go to private schools, and disregarding the people that just can't afford it. Whereas and even on like streaming platforms, rugby's on Premier Sports and Viaplay, and it's very expensive to get that. And like if you want to watch the European games, it's on. So even if you want to watch the European games, it's on like dead late at night because it's in France, or it's on the French TV, and it's really difficult to get a hang of. So yeah, I just think it's quite difficult. Well, what about from your perspective then? You've been to a few games. Do you think it's easily accessible to watch in person and online then?
Well, of course, my local team is the Glasgow Warriors in terms of professional team, and it's not too hard to get there, and the ticket prices, they're quite a lot, but that's also a problem in football. A lot of the stuff you mentioned is a problem in football: TV prices, ticket prices. I do think that, it's gone up a lot. One of my colleagues recently went to the Scotland-Ireland game, and that was £150 she said she paid for a ticket.
That's crazy.
It's a big game, obviously, but it's just extortionate, and that wasn't a resale or anything near that. That was just the price of the ticket. So yeah, I mean, and online, watching rugby online or in the TV, it's just, compared to football, it's quite hard to find, as you say, and there's lots of different channels. So yeah, I think that is definitely a problem with the accessibility.
But like for me, you'd think like football's the most popular sport in this country by a landslide, and like in the world. So see that being more expensive and that being, I don't know, a bit harder to get a hand on, because it's everyone's wanting to do it, so they can afford to put the prices up. That makes a wee bit more sense in my head. Although it's not great. You don't want it, but it makes sense. But for rugby, I think you're wanting all these fans to engage, or wanting all these fans to get behind their team, but you're outpricing them, which to me is just giving two different sides to the story, which I just don't think is doable. And a big issue for me is like football. For me, it almost comes across as like rugby's big brother. I think rugby has a lot to learn from football. We kind of went over this last time, but I think I want to go more into like the way it's marketed. So football, you're obviously going to chat about it more, but football basically markets itself. do you kind of like agree with what I'm saying, that rugby needs to learn how, like, a wee bit about how football markets itself?
Well, I think it's definitely different because I would say actually rugby is a faster growing sport because football's already so big that it probably doesn't really grow that much, whereas rugby is rapidly growing, even if it's not what it really should be. So I think, yeah, they should learn, but the two sports are in a different stage. I actually think rugby needs to find out its own marketing point. As we say, we were talking about earlier, it's more a day out going to the rugby than it is than the football, and I think that's what it should be trying to market. Football markets its strengths well, and I think rugby should try and do the same.
Yeah, so you almost think like rugby doubles down on the fact it's a day out. Like even for club games, you have all these like performers that come down. You make it a proper experience to go down to the rugby. And to be fair, they're doing that, but they just need to properly go for it more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think especially the die-hard club fans, I mean, they're going to have games week in, week out, and they love all that stuff. That's one thing I like about rugby is there's a lot of culture. You look at the other countries and their dances and their celebrations and their traditions, and Scotland as well, and Scotland and England, especially the rivalry. It's definitely got that kind of atmosphere that football has. They just need to take more of an advantage of it.
I think like watching football, I like the way the game is played and refereed, but I think they could use a lot. They could take a lot of inspiration from rugby. I think a big thing for me is I watch it and I don't like the way that anyone can just go and have a go at the ref, and I think that's one thing that I think in the actual game of football they can take inspiration from rugby. But I'm like nitpicking here. Like football needs to rugby needs to take a lot from football. I don't think football needs to take a lot from rugby, if that makes sense.
I definitely agree. One thing I like about rugby is the transparency from the ref. You know, you can hear what the ref's saying. You might not always agree with what the ref's saying, believe me, but a lot of the time in football you don't actually know why or what the ref was thinking until well after the game, and at that point, you know, things have happened. And yeah, I definitely think that the refereeing style is different. Even I feel like in rugby the ref is kind of more involved in the game, but it's not stopping and starting it. The players almost feel like the ref's almost playing in the game. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I know what you mean.
You know, the ref's involved and he's talking, and you know, even with the what's it called in rugby, TMO?
TMO, yeah.
That's even more run smoothly and all that, and you actually can see the ref's thought process more. I think that's something they are trying to implement in football, but they're definitely not there yet with VAR.
But I think that's good. Like, so the new thing they've added in rugby is they've kind of taken inspiration from American sports in the NFL, and when the rugby makes a decision, they come over loudspeakers in the stadium, and I think that almost adds another aspect of letting people know in the stadium what the thought process is of the referee. And I think, to me, that's just what needs to happen in football, especially. I think you'll go watch a game, like my family's all dead into their football. You go watch a game with them, none of them have any idea what's going on because the referee doesn't tell them, and one, it stops people from understanding the rules because they're not getting explained to it by professionals. Two, then they all think that the referee's got the call wrong until you see the wee videos that come out afterwards about why the referee made that decision. And I think that, as Jake said, it's just too late, and they need to do something better to, I don't know, get that out there quicker, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen actually, but I think it's American, like the American Soccer League, as they would call it, that is now being implemented. Like the ref will come over a loudspeaker. The problem is with football, and it's probably not. That's probably one of the advantages of rugby not being as big as football, is that to get a rule change or a decision, it's, you know, in football you've got to go through the league, whatever league you're in, and then the FA, and then UEFA or FIFA or whoever it is, and there's just so many different bodies and organisations. It's really, really hard in football to actually get something changed because there's just so much bureaucracy.
So do you think almost like a good step would be to almost combine it? So like we've got all the different unions, but they all go through World Rugby, and World Rugby is the main body, and any decisions go through World Rugby and feed back to the SRU or the IRU, the RFU, all the different like national teams unions. That's probably a better way to do it.
Yeah, well, that is probably what FIFA is supposed to do, but as anyone who knows anything about football will know, FIFA don't have the best reputation, and a lot of corruption, a lot of mismanagement. A lot of the fans just feel like that they don't actually know they're out of touch with the fans. You know, they don't know what the fans want. With some of these tournaments, the Club World Cup in America coming up, divided opinion. You know, too many games. It's just all about the money now. Even the World Cup in America, some of the ticket prices coming out are just ridiculous. Almost feels like that is what football's lacking, is that it's almost too much about the money now.
Yeah, I get you. I understand. So, before we get into it, we'll just do another quick word from our sponsor.
I don't know, man. I just don't think there's any good music out there anymore.
What are you talking about?
I mean, think about it. I finish here in the studio and then just listen back to our great podcast on my headphones. There's nothing out there.
You clearly just don't know where to look. Here, let me put you on to someone. Have you ever heard of Renstar?
Renstar? Who's that?
Well, he's the first artist of that new Glasgow label, W2 Records.
Nah, I never heard of them. Or Renstar.
Really? Damn. You need to get out more. They've released songs like this.
I don't know what life is, I'm having a crisis, but I just disguise it, getting hella high lit. I'm too good a call, but I really wanna ball, so I check my phone with darkness in my dome.
And this.
She pulling me up and now she bringing me down. Used to make me smile, but she making me frown. She pulling me up and now she bringing me down. I could have said something, but I never made a sound.
Man, that's pretty good. I'll have to listen to some more of them.
W2 Records are a new up-and-coming record label with new aspiring artists ready to take the world by storm. Although only starting last year, they are really making major moves in the music scene and are going to be the next big thing. Watch this space for the W2 takeover. Thank you to W2 Records for sponsoring this podcast. Now, let's get back to the rugby. So, I want to talk a wee bit about like the big names, right? Obviously in football, you have a massive amount of big names. Like, you have new ones, old ones, like you have your Messi, Ronaldos, all them. And they've all made their success, but have they? How do you think they've done that? Is it down to like pure performance? So like, obviously, like you have players in football who are great, but they're not really the ones that sell tickets. You know what I mean? And then you have the ones that are not as good, but they're just class to watch. They're class to hear from. Do you think it's down more to performance or personality in football?
Well, I think back in the day for football, you know, your Pelés and your Maradonas and all these kind of older style footballs, they didn't have the same level of marketing and PR. I mean, footballers nowadays, they probably don't even post on Instagram or their own tweets. They've all got managers and agents and all that. I think the best footballers now are the ones that are the most entertaining, and the best matches are the ones that are, you know, the rivalries, the derbies, the big games. And I think that's what makes individual football characters, you know, how they behave in the big games, how they perform, the drama. Do they miss a penalty? You know, just feel like it's all about the PR for footballers now.
Yeah. No, I that makes sense. It is more just about like, yeah, they've all got their own PR team and it's all about making them look as good as possible off the ball as well as on the ball. So, I ask this mostly because I think within rugby, I don't feel there are enough big characters, to be honest. Like, I think you'd probably agree. There's basically no one.
Yeah.
And I think that's a massive reason why the sport struggles. I think like you look in Scotland and they've done alright for themselves with Finn Russell. He's a pretty big character. He does well for himself. He sells tickets. But, like Henry Pollock, for example, you won't know who he is. He's 20 years old, started playing for Northampton Saints, who won the Prem last year, and they've made it to a final, and it's largely because of him. And he's kind of brought a new aspect to rugby you don't see. He celebrates his tries, like he pretended to like do a basketball throw and throw it on one of the opposition team, like that was causing a fight with him. It's not nothing big in football, but it's never seen in rugby. You don't really celebrate. You just kind of jump at each other, and it's all just a big thing. And I think like for example now he's been picked for the Lions at 20 years old. He's the second youngest player to ever do it, and I think like rugby needs guys like that. And I think if we're going to get any further as a sport, we need them to be thriving. Like from an outside perspective, do you think many in Scotland could even name like the Scotland captain or any of the other players in the country for that matter?
I mean, those who are into rugby, of course, they would be able to, but I would say a lot of people, even I know, wouldn't be able to name any more than one or two characters, if even that. I mean, on social media I've heard of this female rugby player, Iona Maher. I think that's her name.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. In the rugby scene, she's known. Like she's very known. She plays for America in rugby sevens, and like she's She's the most popular rugby TikTok and Instagram account of all time, and it's probably really done well for the women's sport. And I think, like, for example, she joined Bristol in the English Women's League, and they're now she's left now, but they're now getting more like week in week out than Glasgow do. And I think, like, that's like Bristol aren't that good a side, but Glasgow win trophies, and I don't know about it. They play in the men's league. Like, the men's league is known as being more popular, so it's just it shows us how well she's doing for herself and how well she's doing for rugby. And I think the men's sport needs that, and it's really it's what's missing from the sport. I think they're too old fashioned. They like everything done the way it was done 30 years ago, and they need to realise that they're now in the age of social media and technology, and they need to start adapting to it, because I just don't think it happens. So we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to ask one more question. After all this chat about the big names in rugby, so I've told you about your Finn Russells, your Iona Mars and all that, and you were telling me no one's even heard of them. You don't think they'd heard of them. Do you think this is just down to how poorly they're being marketed, or do you think it's down to the fact that no one will really turn around and watch a rugby game?
I mean, I think it's probably more down to the marketing, because there's footballers that, I mean, you know yourself, famous footballers that are coming for the ranks that you probably never actually even watched play.
Yeah.
You know, you don't watch football, but you know these guys.
You
know what to do.
I know, like, your the Barcelona was a young boy.
Lamine
Yamal. I know him. I've never watched him.
And you've probably seen him on Instagram and YouTube clips and all that. I think that's what's missing, is the kind of development of characters in rugby. Iona would be one of them, but as you say, that's the women's game, and that's one thing that they seem to have gotten right here, and the men could do with learning from, because I think to develop the players and get them more well known, you need to have the marketing teams and the PRs I was saying about football earlier. Otherwise people won't know any individual players, they'll just know the team.
I think that's the one thing that you can confidently say. Rugby's been out for years, so I think they're almost still behind. Whereas I think the women's game's still quite new and fresh. So because it's new and fresh, they've got new and fresh minds behind it, and that's why they're doing so much better at marketing themselves than the men's game is. And I think that's just a big issue. And once we get down to the nitty gritty of it, get the social medias done right, we'll start to see rugby grow, we'll start to see people watching it, and you'll start to see more people actually knowing who's representing their country. And especially like in the British Lions, like, I know I've spoken to people recently about the British Lions, and they didn't even know it was happening. They didn't know Scotland were playing in it, and they didn't know what Scotland players had been picked. And I just think it's quite tough to see that as a rugby fan. So that's pretty much us for today. I appreciate you joining me again, Jake, for another episode of Rugby for Rookies. It was good to get your viewpoint on loads of the different aspects of the marketing and the differences between football and rugby, and a wee bit about the women's game. It was dead interesting.
Yeah, I had a good time today. It was interesting conversation. I appreciate you having me on again.
Well, that's us. We'll see you all next week as we chat more about the marketing of rugby, and we'll go more into the women's rugby, and we'll get down to the nitty gritty of it. This was Rugby for Rookies, brought to you by W2 Records.